Mm, mm, I move myself. Oh. Can you hear me? Oh,
Looks like Cliff's gone.
where's Cliff? Okay. All right. Everybody else is here. I believe Pete's here.
Okay, we're back.
All right.
Hello.
Hello. There he is.
How are you doing there?
Yay.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Yeah, we're keeping well here in South Bend. It's by our standards pretty hot and muggy, but wouldn't mean much in Florida.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for doing this. You have been amazing. Ever since you halted your campaign, you have put in the work for everybody on every level. So the things you said along the way with the campaign about how it's not just important who's at the top of the ticket, but it's important in every race. You don't just say that, you've really put in a lot of the work. I know you jump from literally one Zoom meeting to the next every day. And I just want to say personally how much I appreciate it. For those of you who don't know, this is former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg, former Democratic presidential candidate who won Iowa. I think we have to say that over and over again. And has just been an amazing human being I know there are many Pete supporters on this phone call, but for those who might not be as familiar with you, the grace and the integrity with which you ran your campaign was simply incredible. Your ability to communicate without dismissing people, without alienating people is also, I think, a talent that we just don't see much today.
Well, thanks so much for the kind word, and thanks for the chance to join you today. I'm so excited and thankful for all the work that you did campaigning at my side when I was seeking the presidency. And you're right, you know, coming off the campaign trail was it's a strange experience, I think, for anybody after spending a year and a half going across the country, rarely being in the same state for more than a day and sometimes more than a few hours. But I knew as soon as our campaign ended that so much of the work was just beginning, because we can't get caught treating the presidency like it's all that matters. And while I'm enthusiastically backing Joe Biden for president, and I hope everyone here is helping in that effort, that's not enough. We need to make sure we have great leadership at every level. And I know that you're going to bring that leadership to the State House in Florida, because I know you, because I've seen your compassion, I've seen your approach, I've seen your problem-solving style. And, you know, mayors, as we mayors like to say, get things done. And I believe if mayors ruled the world, this would be a better place. And, you know, one thing in particular I want to say about state legislatures, you know, in the American system, so much of the power lies in state legislation. I think mayors know, because our cities are in so many ways creatures of state law, just how much the states not only add up to what the country is doing, but also really shape what is possible in our cities and towns and communities. And so to have somebody who has the insights that you do, and the experience and the unique story that you do, and bring that into the State House, and to do it for the right reasons. I'm so touched by the fact that you're doing this at the request of a friend and in honor of somebody who didn't make it and had a chance to serve, knowing that this is the right thing to do, not because you've always wanted to do it, but because you know this is where you can make a difference. You're in it for the right reasons. You're bringing the right experience, and you're joining state government. You will be, with our help, at a moment when it couldn't matter more. So I'm so proud to be campaigning with you virtually. My only regret is we're not there together physically, but I'm so pleased to see so many wonderful people gathering in the proverbial room here too, and looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, thank you. Well, I actually wanted to talk to you when you talk about we'd be better off with mayors in charge. In many ways, mayors have to be we have to get the work done. We can't just say, well, the other side didn't agree with me, so I'm sorry, your trash isn't going to be picked up. We are actually held accountable. But what are your thoughts overall on leadership, especially given the COVID crisis? I mean, we've seen different types of leadership, lack thereof. What do you think are kind of the most important qualities or types of leadership you've seen, or anything on your thoughts regarding leadership?
For me, my sense of what leadership is about starts with my belief in what people are about. That's rooted in a faith that teaches that people aren't all good or all bad. We're just people, and we're all capable of good things and bad things. We're capable of working hard and being lazy and being kind and being mean, and knowing that about people.
Are you ever lazy? Is that a thing?
I have my moments. The balance of that is what makes us people. But it turns out that's really shaped by who our leaders are. That leaders can call forth, they can call out what is best in us, or they can appeal to what is worst in us. And the more precarious or frightening or dangerous a situation is, the more it really matters to have leaders who do call out to what is best in us in the name of our shared values. And I think, that's the part every mayor understands that, as you did when your community faced tragedy. You have to do what you can to call out the best in people, as you did. I wish we had a president who did that. I wish we had more leaders who do that. We're seeing right now how much it matters who your governor is and how much it matters who's in state office. And so, having that kind of leadership that calls out the best in us matters so much. The other thing that matters, I think, is just clarity. Speaking to the information we need. In the case of the pandemic, getting factual information, being honest about what we don't know yet, and guiding people toward accurate information about how to keep ourselves and one another safe. It's literally lives depend on whether mayors and state leaders and governors and president can speak with one voice. And unfortunately, right now, that's not happening. And so there's a chance to get that right, to get that kind of alignment. But I also think is such an important part of what we should expect from our leaders, to get factual information and to get beyond politics when we have a profound crisis on our hands.
Yeah, I agree with that. We've seen that a lot as a local mayor and as a mayor of a very small city. It's been very hard when messaging on all other levels of government have been all over the place. We talk about how we want to minimize the spread, and yet we see elected officials on their social media and other places without masks on or not practicing social distancing. And to a certain extent, leadership is also not just telling everybody else what they should be doing, but setting the example and letting people know that I'm not just saying this to say it, but it's based on data. And I'm also willing to do the work to make sure that we all stay safe. And that's been hard on a local level, because how can we do it on a local level when our governor is practicing the best practices, when our president is not practicing the best practices? And then people say, well, why should I believe you if the others aren't doing it? So I totally agree on that. One of the things you talked about a lot on the campaign trail was the idea that running for office is an act of hope. And in these days where we're dealing with racial injustices, where we're dealing with COVID, and where it seems at times that the circus has taken over the news waves, and that people have forgotten about the humans behind some of these policies and people's everyday lives. What do you look for to feel hopeful, or what do you see out there that makes you hopeful?
Well, I'm not just playing to the room. It's really true when I say that the thing that really gives me a lot of hope is working with candidates like you. We have launched the Win the Era PAC, and since then endorsed 22 great candidates through a very selective process, and you're among them. And whenever I feel a lot of pressure on my sense of hope or on my optimism, and we all have, right? I mean, we're looking around us. We're confronting the most challenging and in many ways worst elements of our country's history and legacy when it comes to present day effects of systemic racism. We're confronting this terrible pandemic that robs us of that basic comfort of being together with people we care about. And increasingly seeing something else that I think is gravely concerning, which is the conduct of our elections, where in many states there are not enough Not just, by the way, I'm very worried about voter suppression, but also just the fact we don't have enough poll workers to staff in-person voting locations, and need to make sure that we do a better job by mail and through safe in-person voting, make sure everybody can vote. We're up against some huge challenges. They're testing the fabric of our country, and it gets me down too sometimes. But then I do an event like this. I'm with the leaders who I know are going to make a difference for the future, and people are stepping up. And stepping up to run for offices that are demanding, that aren't always glamorous, but are unbelievably important and carry so much power. And whenever I get a chance to do an event like this, I walk away with my hope and a recharge, because it's a living, breathing example of that act of hope that I like to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, on a local level, with the hope, I don't watch as much television as I used to. I find sometimes it's very difficult to watch the news when they just keep regurgitating the arguments. Where I get hope is when I talk to the people in my community, when I have people tell me stories, and then when I see people who are saying, just reaching out saying they want to help. They felt moved by something. They don't want their neighbors to feel left out. They don't want people to not have masks. So we had people making masks. And even though that seems so simple, I think sometimes when we get caught up in the noise, we kind of forget the people. And focusing on the people who are, just trying to make a difference in this world. And there are actually more of them out there than you would ever know watching cable news. And I think it's important. I think it's important for all of us to find those moments of hope, those moments of joy, one of your rules of the road, because I think that's the only way that we can make a difference, is if we believe there is a difference to be made. So I'm gonna, have you been muted? Are you?
Okay, how about
okay. Oh no, do that. I hope not. And just so you know, we are expecting you to come to Florida whenever it's safe again.
Sign me up. I'll be eager.
Florida wanted you to come down here before you suspended your campaign, and we would love to have you down here again. I know everybody in this room will be there. So
good. I can't wait.
But so I'm going to ask you something, and you can just share this between, the many friends we have on this phone call. We promise not to let it go anywhere. What is your future entail? What position would you like to have in a Joe Biden administration? I know you never get asked that question.
Well, of course, I would love to be helpful wherever I can. And if that means a chance to return to public service, of course, I would leap at that. And if that means doing something outside of government, then I'll be glad for ways to do that too. What I know is that we've got 5 months. 5 months and counting. Pretty soon it'll be closer to 4. And think about how different the world was 5 months ago, how much can change. And so, right now, numbers look pretty good. I feel like we have a tailwind in terms of certainly the country, even a lot of people who generally vote Republican, seeing that we need a change in the White House, and a lot of other races too, but also kind of a headwind in terms of the conduct of the election. And that's, without even knowing what the world's going to throw at us in the next few months. And so, to me, the focus right now just has to be on making myself useful for great candidates, from you all the way through to the vice president. And then I'm sure there'll be a chance to make myself useful in a different capacity once we get through that hurdle together.
Well, I hear pretty much on a daily basis, there are a lot of people in this country who would love to see you as part of this administration, because you have the way you conducted yourself, and I can't say this enough, the way you conducted yourself and the way your team was throughout the campaign was absolutely amazing. The rules of the road, the values that you always showed. So when people do policy, I think sometimes people can get so caught up in the minutia of policy that they forget that it's supposed to be helping people. And they forget the human stories and the impacts that policy has. And I just think you had a great way of humanizing policy, really bringing stories to the forefront. reminding us that we all have value, whether we agree with each other or not. We don't even actually always have to like each other, but it doesn't take away from the fact that we all have value. And I think it's great to have a public servant that does that. What was something you learned from your campaign? Or what were the many things that you learned, lessons learned, good or bad, or different, or?
Yeah, and I'd be curious
to get where you got.
No, I'm still processing some of what we learned, and I'd love to know what you're finding, because you learned so much as mayor, but it's different when you're campaigning. I'd love to toss the question back at you in a minute, but everything from issues that I learned a lot about, and I'll give you one example. The issue of mental health was something that came up again and again and again. It was always something I cared about, but the difference between how often reporters talked about it, or cable news talked about it, or Twitter talked about it, and how often voters talked about it. I'm sure you saw it when we were on the trail together. I mean, just about everywhere I went. And it was a reminder of the importance of listening to people, not just through all the different filters, but really getting out there and going into communities and backyards and diners and just finding out what's on people's minds, which is why we always said it was so important always to have Q&A. Even when we did events with thousands of people, we found we at least had that fishbowl. People would put their questions in, and so that we could always be responding to what was on the minds of the people we were addressing, and not just what was on my mind when I walked in. So I learned a lot about that. I learned a lot about what people have in common. I mean, on one hand, when you're campaigning, you're in the whole country all at once. I mean, we had I think a 4-day period when I crossed country twice. We had 4 state days. There were so many moments where you just, I don't think I ever said I was in the wrong place, but I very nearly, I can't remember if I was in Las Vegas and I thought I was in San Diego, or I was in San Diego and I thought I was in Las Vegas. There are a couple moments where and yet through it all, you see how people want the same things. People want to be healthy. They want to be safe. They want a chance to thrive. They're not expecting the government to be, solely responsible for their success in life, but they are looking for a government that'll empower them to thrive and do a good job of taking care of those conditions that we all need in order to do well, from education to health to an economy that works for us. And you felt that, it had a different texture, maybe it was organized around different particular policies of the day when I was in Nevada compared to when I was in New Hampshire or South Carolina. But in the end, you learn just how much people have in common, and that's a source of hope too, because we do need to remember that it's just people out there. But yeah, I'd love to know what you're finding, especially as you shift from one very demanding job as mayor to also this layer of campaigning and campaigning in a new and different way than what any of us would have expected when just a few months ago when we were out there in person in places like Iowa.
Yeah, no, it's been odd because for all those who know me, I'm a hugger. I like to be around people. I thrive. I like to embarrass people by hugging them. and I miss that. And it's very hard because my favorite thing about campaigning is the door knocking. Is we did canvassing for you, for example, and those stories, I still remember the people I met in Iowa. And I miss that here. So now we're learning through technology, and I thankfully have friends who know a little bit more about technology than I do, and they're helping me do all this stuff, doing outreach that way. But it's interesting. We do have so much in common, and I think what sometimes the Democratic Party doesn't always communicate that in a great way. So I hear when people are talking on the state level about the state budgets, and we have all these line items. I mean, so education becomes a line item. But why isn't education viewed as an investment in our future? Why isn't healthcare? Why is that a line item? Why isn't that as an investment in people's long-term health? So I feel like we often in government, you get talk about expenses, and these are people. These are not expenses. These are investments in the future. And we need to talk about how we're going to plan to invest in our communities, in our youth, in our elderly, in our people across the board. to make our country a better place, to make our country more stronger and more resilient. When you talked about mental health, I remember when you would ask and say, has anybody in the audience been affected by mental health issues, addiction? I mean, we criminalize addiction now. And I don't think there was a hand that didn't go up in the room, except maybe somebody might have been embarrassed. But there is not a family, there is not a community that hasn't been affected by these things. And I just feel like if we don't really start talking about investing in people, investing in opportunities for people, we're not going to be resilient long term. As we've seen with COVID, when everything shuts down real quickly, boy, our resilience goes away really quickly. And I think we now have an opportunity to just really, revamp our systems and really revamp our thinking. I agree with you. I don't run into people ever who say, I want the government to take care of me and I want a handout. What I do hear people saying is, I want a chance, I want an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And as a country that wants to be strong, and a country that wants to have power and resilience, I think the best way we do that is we make sure that our people are strong and that we have invested in our people so that they can be resilient. Talk around a little bit.
Oh, sir.
So I'm trying to learn from you and be a little more eloquent. So we do have some people who would like to ask some questions, if that's okay. The first person we wanted to start with, his name is Sinan. So Sinan was one of my mayors for the month. So I had this program that I started in Parkland, Mayor for a Month program. And it wasn't just one of those, you get a photo op and you get to go home. It was for the month. We have 2 commission meetings every month. So all the mayors for a month, we get a link to our agendas and our agenda packets. They would have to review everything. Then I would meet with them prior to the meeting. So that we could go through what all the rules are that we're limited by on what we can do, go through all the backup material and explain to them what are things we have to take in. So we would go through so I would literally be reviewing my packet and my thought process and with them and getting their input.
What a great idea. I love it.
It's awesome. And then they would come to the commission meetings, and if they had questions that I didn't even have the answer to, or I thought was a really good question to pose for the rest of the commission to hear, I would pose those on the dais. And it was a great opportunity to really not just superficially engage students, but let them really understand what local government is about. And Sinan is also an incredible debater. When he's going into junior year of high school now, but when he was in 7th grade, he was #2 in the country in extemporaneous speaking.
No kidding. Wow. Sounds like someone you're lucky to have on your side.
I am. So Sinan, do we have?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mayor Hunschofsky. And hello, Mayor Pete. My name is Sinan Hunschofsky, and I'm a 16-year-old Parkland resident. And I was honored to be a part of Mayor Hunschofsky's Student Mayor for a Month program. I'm also the nonprofit founder of the Qasim Legacy Foundation, and we work in over 5 countries to create a sustainable and pluralistic world. And my question to you today is, as a youth advocate and on behalf of the youth of our generation, what can we do to build resiliency, move forward into a brighter future, and not lose hope? Thank you so much.
Well, what a great question, and so exciting to hear how much work you've taken on, and that you're not waiting till somebody else decides you're old enough to make a difference in the world. That obviously is similar to the code I live by. So we'll look forward to a chance to vote for you in the future. I think what you're talking about is very much the question of the day, right? We've got to make this a more resilient world, because there's no reason to expect that it's going to get any easier. We just went through a world historical shock in the form of the pandemic. And in some ways, another one in the form of the outcry over racial injustice and systemic racism that's consumed so many of our cities and is being echoed across the world. And there may well be more where that came from in terms of major events that will test our resilience. And so what we need to make sure of is that not only our institutions, but just our communities and as people, that we are mentally, socially, emotionally, educationally prepared for the things that are coming our way. Because it's actually in response to crises that often the very best of humanity comes out, as well as sometimes the very worst. And any lesson, for example, that we learn in the course of dealing with the pandemic, I think we can expect to be a lesson that we'll have to apply in the context of climate change, which is very much upon us. It's certainly impacting my generation. Yours will be really shaped in terms of the opportunities you have by whether we succeed or whether we fail in tackling this. And we're at the beginning of the decade that I think will go down in history as the critical decade, the 2020s, for a lot of things, including our ability to confront climate before it's really too late. So, so much of this comes back to leadership, it comes back to policy, but it also comes to advocacy. You don't have to be in a position of power. You don't even have to be old enough to vote to make a difference. And one thing that I believe has really changed the conversation from the climate conversation to the conversation about gun safety has been young people, some of them not even old enough to vote, with the moral authority that you command when you look into the eyes of people who hold power or hold office, insisting that they do more to make it possible for you to thrive. That moral authority is incredibly powerful. And when you mobilize it and organize it for good, that can actually compel the politicians to follow you rather than the other way around. And so I hope you stay as engaged as you are, because we're going to need every ounce of that if our society is going to get to a better place than we are right now.
Thank you so much, Mayor Pete.
Great seeing you. Thank you.
Pete, also, would you talk maybe a little briefly for those who may not be aware about your Douglas plan? Because that was a remarkable plan, and I don't know that it got as much coverage as I think it probably should have during your campaign.
Yeah, I remain very proud of this, and I've been pleased to see pieces of it continue to live on in different forms, from things that we hear about in the presidential campaign to ideas that are becoming part of the policy conversation on the Hill. The Frederick Douglass Plan was named after Frederick Douglass, who really saw that America could be more and could be better than it then was. And it's about dismantling systemic racism across every area, recognizing that every area is connected. Economic empowerment, health equity, educational opportunity, criminal justice, the conduct of our elections themselves, housing, all of these things closely connected. And by the way, the reason this was such a great plan, and it was the most comprehensive plan put forward on the subject of systemic racism, in my biased, but I swear accurate opinion, and reviewed as such. It wasn't that, of course, I sat in the room and had all these great ideas. It was that this plan was crafted and shaped primarily by Black voices, campaign staff, policy experts, civil rights leaders, who were able to really speak to how these things were connected. The fundamental idea came down to this. In order to move past where we are right now, in order to dismantle the racist structures and the racial inequities we have, it's not enough to just have neutral policies replace racist policies. We have to have intention. We have to be proactive. We have to be, as the new term of art is, anti-racist in our policies, and that's what the Douglass Plan was really all about. So I've been, encouraged that it has stood the test of time. A lot of the ideas in there around reforming police accountability, for example, are now, I think, finding their day in the national debate. But I'm also especially attuned to the questions of economic empowerment that I think remain among some of the most important. Because I'll give you an example. I heard today that the minimum level of collateral you got to put up to even qualify for SBA loans in regular times is greater than the average net worth of a Black family, which means that the average Black family couldn't qualify for these small business loans, knowing that small business and entrepreneurship is one of the most promising ways that we've seen minority and women-owned businesses create opportunities for others. And so it's just one particular example of a piece where we've got to have a lot more intention, and looking forward to seeing leaders who can continue to advance ideas that have that DNA of the Douglass Plan in them, because I think, again, the 2020s will largely turn on whether we succeed in wrestling with systemic racism or whether we allow it to take down the whole American project.
And if I could just point out, even when you talk about the Douglass Plan, the way you talk about in the beginning, that it was you listening to people who knew this issue better than you did. That is leadership. I think so many times today, leaders think they have to have all the answers and all the right answers, and they all have to be their ideas. And leadership is really listening to people who know more, who've experienced more, and can really make policy better. And I think you did that remarkably. And this humility that you had about the way you approach so many of those things was remarkable, even though we all knew in any room we were in, you were always the smartest person in the room.
Hardly.
Definitely.
Well, the next person to ask a question is Mr. Mark Bogan. You are unmuted.
Oh, great, thank you. Mayor Pete, it's an honor to talk to you today. Appreciate your time for being here and supporting Chirstine. I was just curious, following up from Christine's question, where she asked you about politics. If you are not involved in the 2020 administration, what are your plans? What are you going to be involved with besides the PAC that you're doing? You know,
well, what I know is that there's so much work to be done right now, and what I'm sure we've established both the Win the Era PAC and its companion, the Win the Era Action Fund, which is a 501c4 organization that allows me to have a presence in some of the policy conversations that are going on now too. I've been humbled by the awareness that I'm no longer running for president, but also liberated by the awareness that instead of every waking minute going toward one goal, we're actually able to take a smaller but mighty team and a wonderful community of supporters and put it toward many goals. So probably the biggest is supporting great candidates like Mayor Hunschofsky in their races, but also have a presence in other debates that are going on. Just to give you a few examples, one of them is foreign policy, making sure that we contribute to how America can restore its credibility around the world. The tug of war over China, for example, I think calls for a different sort of voice than what we're used to in the kind of partisan debate, because I think China is a massive challenge, but I also think China would benefit from nothing more than the continued chaos and division of the current administration. We're trying to be present in issues of economic justice, like what we were just talking about from the Douglas Plan. And so I valued chances to be in dialogue with organizations that we can, at the very least, amplify and perhaps do a lot more with. So if you look at my Twitter feed, you'll see that we're trying to make sure that we amplify organizations from the Moral Mondays movement and the For People's campaign that recently did a virtual march on Washington, to efforts like Color of Change that are trying to change public and corporate policies. I'm continuing to look for ways to be active in the mental health conversation, because it was, again, such a powerful finding in the course of the campaign. I always cared about it, but to see just how much it mattered was powerful. And I'm very concerned about democracy itself. This was a constant theme on the campaign. And, for better or for worse, in our country, most of the key decisions about how elections run are made one state or county official at a time. And so this really is a conversation playing out in many places. We're all watching Kentucky, Virginia, and some other places having elections tomorrow. And each couple of weeks, we get a new test of our democracy. And what we saw in Georgia and what we saw in Wisconsin was not very good. I'm going to be spending some energy preparing Americans just for the fact that, we may not know the results of the elections for a couple of days in November. And that might actually be okay. That might be a sign that people are doing the work. But we're conditioned to expect NBC to call the election at 7:02, right, in a state that closes polls at 7. So there's going to be some work to do there. And I think as somebody who, after Iowa, knows a thing or two about the effect of delayed results, can maybe contribute to help people understand what's going on with vote by mail and that sort of thing. So all of these issue areas are going to keep me plenty busy, at least through this year. And then I'll have a chance to take stock and I think configure my attention in new ways, hopefully partnering with great leaders in their new roles everywhere from the Florida State House to the White House. And then whether it means me back in government or me being useful in some other way, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Did we have a question? Kevin O'Connor, you had a question?
Oh, here I am. Mayor Pete, thanks for being here with us today. I really appreciate it.
Same here. Thanks for wearing my favorite shirt.
Got my water bottle too here, Pete.
Oh, wonderful.
Certainly the way the campaign is changed since March 1st. And I'm my question is, those of us that are veteran campaigners and those that are not, the way we campaign for you is certainly going to change in the coming months. And what are your recommendations in terms of how we wrestle with this virtual environment? We're not going to have, I don't foresee us seeing many rallies or town halls or things that you used to come here and attend in Fort Lauderdale and other places in Iowa where we got so energized by all that activity. What do you suggest in this virtual climate for us to get that same kind of energy and joy and
Yes.
responsibility there and some of the rules of the road? How do we get those
Yeah.
into a virtual campaign mode?
It's a great question. Teamwork, belonging, a lot of these, we're used to them being in the context of literally being at each other's side in the trenches. I thought the best part of Win the Era would be hitting the road and stumping for candidates I believed in. And so we're doing it virtually, but it's different. Here's what I think is really important. I love the way you framed the question, because sometimes this question is posed in terms of the candidates. How can Joe Biden be an effective candidate from the basement in Delaware? How can Mayor Hunschofsky campaign when you can't have rallies? They're doing what they've got to do. They're doing the work. I mean, look at what they do all day, right? They're engaging on issues, dealing with important policies, rallying supporters, raising money, talking to the press. They're doing the same stuff. They just have to do it in this constrained way. The real question is, how are we who aren't on the ballot but are supporting those who are, how do we do our work virtually? And how do we do it without some of the comforts of being in person? For me, for example, I'm not the kind of guy who, this might sound odd for a candidate, but I'm not the kind of guy who found it easy to go knock on the doors of strangers or go call a bunch of people on the phone. And so as a volunteer, I always benefited from looking to the person to my right and the person to my left and knowing that there was the smell of coffee, that just we all in a physical campaign headquarters, right? We all know that we're in the same project. But we also know from experience that there are ways to do this or to create that sense of support virtually. And many of them we piloted on our campaign. The concept of relational organizing, that it's not just about reaching out to people we don't know, it's about reaching out to the people we do know and using those networks to spread a message with a lot of power that goes with that. It was our digital captain program, reminding people that what you do with your social media presence is as important as things we used to do, or maybe still do, like have a yard sign out or other kind of in-person campaigning that we did. But I think the most important thing is building that sense of community, that there is a community of supporters behind the people that we believe in, and that's a matter of lifting each other up. And we're doing it now, right? It's different, it's attenuated, but we're doing it here in the Zoomosphere. And there are other ways that sometimes they're not based on any newfangled technology. It's as simple as remembering how to use the phone and check in with people who believe in the same thing, and maybe egg each other on a little bit in our volunteer work, right? That's going to be the real test. We are the answer to that question that you posed about how we get this right. The candidates are doing candidate stuff, and they're doing it well. It's up to us who support them to make sure we're doing just as good a job while we're in this. And look, some of the things, when we get the chance, we'll go right back to what we used to do. Some things will change forever. And I'm excited to see what innovations will come out of this period in the way that we reach one another too.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Great question.
Yeah, and Kevin was one of those people who was knocking on doors in Iowa. We have several Floridians who are on this call who were the crazy ones who decided in January, what could we do? Let's go to Iowa. Let's
I love it.
For Pete. So it was great. And there is that joy in connecting with people. And listen, if you're not having fun as part of the process, then there's something, you're not doing it the right way then. There's something about when you feel strongly about an issue, when you feel strongly about a candidate, and when a group of you get together and say, we're going to figure this out and we're going to call our friends and then we're going to have great stories to talk about, and just making it, just working together is even a sense of belonging. And feeling that cohesiveness, feeling that connection to one another, it brings a lot of joy. And listen, there's enough out there in this world that is difficult and not fun, that it's important to always focus on those moments of joy. Right. And your campaign did that better than than anyone I saw, Pete, so. Cliff, do we have another question?
There's quite a few questions. There was a really good question on Generational Z. I believe it was, sorry, you caught me off guard. Julie, it's Julie, is it Cloak? K-L-O-C-K. I'm unmuting if you'd like to ask your question.
Hi, Julie Clucky.
Hello.
I'm from Iowa, and Christine came and knocked doors here in Ankeny, so thanks, Christine, for doing that. And I have a middle school age son and some other younger sons, and they've got a lot of stress and a lot on their minds right now, especially being in isolation and that kind of thing, and feeling kind of powerless. So my question is, how can we empower and raise the voices of Gen Z? We see a lot of the older ones, like the high school, young college age, are the ones out there marching and protesting and that kind of thing. So how can, I mean, I am a millennial, but how can us older ones help raise those voices and encourage activism in Gen Z in the right way?
Yeah. It's great seeing you, and make sure to bring all our greetings to our friends in Ankeny. It was such a warm and welcoming place. I think this is such a challenge, especially for the youngest, maybe not the very little, kids who haven't quite pieced together how this is any different, but that that middle range that feel very confused and isolated and have been so disempowered by this. I think a lot of it is trying to educate ourselves as adults on how their needs are developing, and there are a lot of good resources out there that are paying attention to this. From Andy Slavitt did a whole podcast on how to support kids in the context of the pandemic. Sesame Street's doing a whole series coming up, which I love, just as they did some really touching pieces to really help explain and characterize what was going on around racial justice in the country. So I think unfortunately, we're only now getting to the moment where there's a powerful creative response. It's taken a while, I think, because everybody's just been so thrown, but now I think it's starting to happen. And I honestly think a big part of the solution is going to be art. Technology can help, right? They can help link people to each other, but it's especially at that kind of tender age that kids are coming of age, that you're so attuned to the need for real tactile human interaction with other people, right? And you feel almost more alienated because it's got to happen over a screen. But crises have actually generally prompted people to respond in music and art and literature and film in ways that are very powerful. And I wouldn't be surprised if that winds up providing the touchstone in ways we can't guess. We just ought to be on the lookout for it and support it. And it may even come over, various technological media that you and I don't feel as native to. I can't believe I'm how old I feel in the face of TikTok and some of these other things out there. But we should be, I think, attuned to those creative responses in addition to just trying to, talk as best we can, talk younger people through this, because I think those might be able to succeed in emotional connection where maybe our words or our analytical frameworks that we get from reading about the psychology of all this are going to fall short.
Well, our
Thank you.
next, oh,
We have a special guest who joined us. This is our Congressman Ted Deutsch.
Wonderful.
I don't know if you've ever met, but Ted is the epitome of the best there is in public service. Somebody who, even though he's in Washington a lot, stays very connected to his district. Ted?
Well, thanks. I only, Mayor Hunschofsky, since it's you and I'm comfortable enough, I should not be seen in public, but I just got back from a long walk with my new puppy.
Oh,
so cute.
This is Ziggy. That's why I've been, and I'm actually he's very cute, but I'm going to go off there so you don't have to see me. But thanks very much. It's great to be on with two really first-rate public figures. And my question, Mayor Pete, it's actually great to meet you. This is a long time coming, and it's an honor, and I appreciate everything that you've been doing. And the question is, for people like Chirstine and you who understand that that decency is important, not just in an elected official because we need to relate to others, but because it's what people it's what makes people feel they can relate to us. It's what people look for, and it helps us as we try to sort of reestablish our place in the world after this administration. So what's the best way, other than electing really great public officials like Chirstine, what's the best way for us to really reassure people that that even through all of the challenges that we face, that we're just a good and decent people that are committed to the best for our country, and that want to that other people will want to come along and join that effort?
Yeah, what a great question, and it's a real honor to be with you. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for your leadership in the House, and in particular on ethics, which is more important than ever. So I'm delighted that you can make a little time to be with us, and congratulations on the puppy as well. I'll send greetings from Buddy here and Truman in a minute. So, to me, so much of it is finding people where they are. I think almost every social evil has something to do with treating people as something other than people. And it can, of course, happen because of racial bias. Sometimes it happens because of just ideological gulf that makes it harder to see the humanity in somebody. I always remember this moment when we were somewhere in Western Iowa, rural, very conservative. As I always did, we did the Q&A toward the end, called on a guy, and it was in the split second after I called on him that I saw he was wearing a big Trump baseball hat. And I thought, well, I just asked for it. And he was worried about Social Security. That was his question. He wanted to know basically if it was going to be okay. And he was not there to cause a problem. He was there because he was curious. I don't know if you ever voted for me or not, but it was just one of those little moments that reminds you that we have common aspirations and concerns. And one of the things we found was that if you meet people where they are and recognize their humanity, you can also resist the temptation to compromise any of your values or positions in order to get their attention. I didn't do so well in Trump/Obama counties by pretending to be more conservative than I was. We did well because of the way that our volunteers treated people, and the tone we tried to strike to let people know that we really wanted to beckon them to come with us rather than drag them along. I've been thinking about this a lot this week in the context of LGBTQ progress and inequality, that a lot of people have been kind of tiptoeing or even stumbling toward what I view as the right side of history. But as long as we're encouraging them and getting there instead of kind of pointing them into, backing them into a corner with a finger pointed at them, we can make it a little bit easier just psychologically for people to come around and for people to come our way. And at a moment like this, when I think a lot of people's worldview has been shaken, and that's especially true for many of our Republican counterparts and friends who have, for very good reason, come to question whether what they thought being a conservative meant really works or applies in Donald Trump's America. There's a wonderful opportunity here. Especially with voters. It's harder with elected officials because they get painted into their partisan corner pretty quick. But with the voters who send them there, I think there's a greater opportunity than there's been at any time in my lifetime, just by showing that regard for where people are. And again, it's not about watering down what we believe. We can double down on what we believe, but do it respectfully and do it in dialogue. And find that there is so much more appetite for it, and so much more, I think, sympathy for our values than we might have guessed if we were just looking at the numbers.
That was great.
Thanks.
Sarah, you had a question? Sarah?
Hold on one second.
I get Sarah. Okay.
Mayor Pete. So I was a junior at Virginia Tech on April 16, 2007. And I've been an activist for gun safety laws in the 13 years since that shooting happened. And every time a shooting or an event like that happens, we see a spike in support for legislation. And then it disappears when the media attention goes away. It felt like something was different after Parkland, and unfortunately, even that attention ended up going away. I've been super active in the Black Lives Matter protests in the last 3 weeks, and I'm concerned that we're going to have the same thing happen in the coming weeks when the attention goes away. How do we keep up the energy and actually get some legislation passed while we have this movement?
Well, first of all, thanks for taking that terrible experience and turning it into the advocacy and the activism that you had. And I'm glad that you are strong in that and strong in supporting the movement for Black Lives, because this is a time where we're all going to want to answer for where we stood on this. And you're right, there's a parallel, I'm afraid, between all the times that there was a hope for a breakthrough in racial justice and the many times there was hope for a breakthrough on gun safety and gun law. And I've been asking myself that same question. Is this time different? Is this time really different? And this is where I think at the end of the day, it is going to come down to elections. Don't get me wrong. I think advocates have rightly said, wait a minute, like this is not just, don't take all this energy and just say, this means vote for my guy, right? Like this is bigger than that. This is about creating societal change that the politicians will have no choice but to respond to. But also, as President Obama, I think, eloquently reminded us when he spoke on this issue, in the end, this is about making sure specific laws and specific policies and specific institutions change. And a lot of that depends on who we put in charge of them. In a democracy, the moment of greatest power that we have is election days. And so I do believe that there are enough Americans now who believe in these changes, that they have to happen. But for them to happen anytime soon, we have to get past the fact that right now most Americans can want something, and it still doesn't happen. It's clearly the case. I mean, look at background checks, right? I mean, the kind of minimum step we got to take on guns, and 90% of Americans think we should do it. 80% of Republicans think we should do it. It still doesn't happen, right? And that's a question of our institutions. That's why democracy, this always important but never urgent issue, this deep, meaningful but not quite sexy enough issue of process, right, is so terribly important. If we have districts that are drawn in such an unfair way, if we have money continue to play the role that it does in politics, if voter suppression goes unpunished and uncorrected, if those things continue, then it'll never be enough to move the people because the people will be thwarted by the process. And that's why I think this time we really do have to treat the process, the issue of how we deal with their issues, as urgently as we do those individual, hugely important issues, from racial justice to gun safety to raising wages and empowering workers. But I think now's our chance to do it. And the good news is, because of the way the calendar works, if we do it in 2020, if we get redistricting reform now, that'll last long enough that we can consolidate those gains. And then, after years of this bottled up frustration, right, we could have one of the most fertile and productive periods of American policymaking in modern memory, certainly in your lifetime and mine. That's the chance that we have. So this moment of mobilization can't just be about what we're against. It's got to be organized around the hope of what we're for. And even in this moment, especially in this moment, I think it's a good time to be hopeful.
That's one of the things that you have always been able to do well, Pete, is just the way you communicate on such a human level. It's like, it goes back to what I was talking about before, that listening. In public service, you have to be able to listen in order to come up with the policies. And sometimes it's not even, it's about empowering the people who have the answers to help make the policy, make the change and the difference. We have a lot of work to do, but I agree with you. It's a time to be hopeful, because I find in every time of crisis, there is the opportunity to make systemic change. And this is, I think, epitome of, I don't know how many crises we can really count at this point in time, but there are many of them. And I have never seen, and I'm 50 now, so I don't know that I'm generational change, but I'm definitely empowering the next generation and thinking long-term for the next generation. But I don't think I've ever seen it in my lifetime where people are on the same page about saying, you know what, we can't keep doing the things the way we've been doing them. We've got to start thinking about different ways and innovative ways to change and bring equality to everyone. And I don't know that we've seen that before. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, this moment calls for something. So look, we got to recognize that the way we emerge from this moment is nothing less than what our political and social future is going to look like for the rest of our lives. I mean, that's what we're in. And you know, there's a kind of terror about that, I think, but there's a huge opportunity. And if we can draw a kind of comfort in that, and then use that to mobilize around exactly what you're describing, that this could well be the forcing mechanism we've waited for so long, if we actually act and get it done.
Yeah. And with acting to get it done, it means registering to vote, making sure
Yes.
you have your vote by mail ballot, making sure you have a plan to vote. That's what's the beauty of the vote by mail ballot. If you're in a state that allows it, Florida does allow it. It was actually Republicans who pushed it until now they're not pushing it. Because it's important to make sure that that's where the action is. It's in the voting. Pete, I know we're almost done, so I just wanted to say thank you so much. Thank you for not only always speaking so beautifully and speaking with such empathy and passion for what you believe in, but showing up and doing the work always. I don't believe you're ever lazy. I can't imagine that there's such a thing. You go from one meeting to the next, the people you support, you've done everything you said you were going to do in the campaign, and everything you said was important. You've literally put your work and your efforts behind that post-campaign, and you're just remarkable. There, that was as minimally complimentary as I could be toward you.
Well, thanks, Sue. You're too kind, and I'm honored to be here. And like I said, I mean, these events really fill my sails. And from the questions, it's so clear that we have such a wonderful community of supporters that give me so much hope about where we can go from here. We know what we're up against, but we also know what we're for. And it's why I'm enthusiastic about supporting your campaign. It's why I'm convinced that if we bring all our energies into getting good results this fall and beyond, we'll actually look back on these troubled times as a turning point. So thanks for the chance to be with you. Thanks for stepping up in the first place and for your leadership. I know you have so much on your plate right now. And hopefully in person, but whatever the circumstances, I can't wait for that moment when we're celebrating your win and looking to the road ahead in November. So here's to doing everything we can to get from here to there. And thanks everybody for being part of this and for generously helping to make sure that we send Mayor Hunschofsky to the State House. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Pete, and thank you for all you've done. We appreciate it. And everybody, even though Pete's leaving us, you can still hang around. We're going to still do some chatting.